Hey Crocoduck Army, did you know that Irish people don't ever say top of the morning to you? Well, I didn't either until I went to Ireland about a month ago. I was already pretty sure that there were no leprechauns though, and I saw no evidence there to convince me otherwise. I did see lots of different shades of green and plenty of sheep, so those are not myths. Their love for Guinness beer is also not a myth, and judging by the guy I saw on Friday night being helped down the street in Dublin with blood spattered from his nose all the way down his right shoulder, the Irish do indeed partake in the occasional pub fight. In general, though, the Irish were quite friendly, and it was clear that the Irish are very happy to have American tourists around. I even got to sample the notoriously chilly and rainy weather, but it got better later in the week. Here's my picture of the famous Cliffs of Moher. Can you see it? I couldn't either. If you enjoy alcohol, and I know you do, you'll probably love Ireland. As I already mentioned, Guinness is beloved all over Ireland, and the brewery is absolutely enormous, in its own walled-off area in Dublin. I know people say it's better in Ireland somehow, but I couldn't tell the difference. It's a bit too bitter for my taste anyway. We did a tour of the Jameson whiskey distillery, and even though I'm not a big whiskey fan, the tour was actually much more informative and interesting than I had expected. I really liked the food in Ireland. I often had black pudding with breakfast, which is a somewhat sausage-like food consisting largely of pork blood and oatmeal, but it tastes much better than it sounds. Irish restaurants used to have the reputation in decades past of being bland and just generally serving food that's boiled until it's dead, but I can tell you from experience that those days are behind them. I had some excellent food there, everything from fresh local seafood to a Michelin-starred restaurant in Dublin called Chapter 1, where I had some pretty awesome rabbit. So are there potatoes? Yeah, there are potatoes, but they're not the focal point of the meals. So you can save your potato jokes for Dan Quayle. Ireland has quite a history of tragedy, repression, and struggle in general, which goes way beyond the potato famine. When England colonized it hundreds of years ago, they imposed a series of laws over the centuries which were quite brutal to the population. They made laws against the speaking of Gaelic, the language of Ireland before the English arrived. They also made laws regarding inheritance and employment that were favorable to Protestants and economically crippling to the Catholic population. All of this, of course, resulted in a series of wars and rebellions in Ireland, and that all continued right through to the troubles of modern times in Northern Ireland that only just ended officially in 1998, though there's still violence from time to time among those who don't like the agreement. The total death toll of centuries of religious sectarian conflicts is at least in the hundreds of thousands. I wonder if more people have died worldwide from sectarian violence or interreligious violence. There's of course a lot more detail to all that than I can possibly go into here, so for those who complain that YouTubers don't give enough detail on a very complicated subject spanning hundreds of years in a 5-minute video, then you can start with the pages in the info bar and work your way out from there. Another big factor that shaped Ireland, and to a large extent the United States as well, was the Great Potato Famine of the mid-1800s, and that killed over 1 million people. It drove another few million to emigrate to the US, Australia, Canada, and other places around the world, and the population is still well below what it was before the famine. The economy in Ireland has been a bit shaky since the financial collapse, but they seem to be surviving. Tourism, of course, is, as always, important to their economy too. I tried to help by buying a bunch of overpriced souvenirs. There's a lot of culture to be experienced in Ireland. As I mentioned, they're very mindful of the number of Americans with ancestry in Ireland, and there are places where they have records that will help you trace it. The Powerscourt estate is a really beautifully maintained piece of history, as are the old monastic buildings around Glendalough. Of course, if you're into pubs and Irish music, you can find lots of that there too. That's also where you can meet the friendly local Irish people. The National Museum of Ireland in Dublin is an absolute can't-miss attraction if you're interested at all in history. And they also have most of the so-called bog bodies there, people who died thousands of years ago and were amazingly well preserved in the peat bogs of Ireland. Oh yes, and speaking of creepy, don't forget to think of me when you kiss the Blarney Stone at Blarney Castle while you're there, because I already gave it a big sloppy wet kiss, just for you.